If someone had asked me a month earlier whether I thought my marriage was in trouble, I would have laughed. Emily and I had been together for almost 20 years, married for 17, and at that point we didn't need grand romantic gestures to know we loved each other. Life had settled into the kind of routine that younger couples probably think is boring, but honestly, I loved it. Every weekday morning I woke up at 6, made coffee while Emily packed Noah's lunch for school, and by 6:30 we'd both be moving around the kitchen without saying much because we already knew exactly what the other person was doing. She'd hand me my travel mug before I even reached for it. I'd grab her sweater from the back of the dining chair because she always forgot it there. And before walking out the front door, I'd kiss her goodbye. It had been that way for years. Nothing about that Monday morning felt different until I leaned over, kissed her like I always did, and heard her quietly say, "Thank you." I remember smiling because I thought she was joking. "For what?" I asked. "The kiss." I laughed, grabbed my keys, and said, "You don't have to thank me for kissing my own wife." "I know," she answered with a small smile. "I just wanted to." There wasn't anything strange about the way she said it. No awkwardness, no sadness, no hesitation. If anything, she sounded completely sincere. I didn't think about it again for the rest of the day. The next morning, it happened again. Same kitchen, same rushed breakfast, same goodbye kiss. "Thank you." This time I looked at her for a second longer. "You okay?" "I'm fine." "You sure?" She nodded. "Of course." That was enough for me. After almost 2 decades together, you learn not to interrogate every little thing your spouse says. People change. They develop habits without realizing it. Emily had started drinking black coffee after turning 40, even though she'd spent 15 years insisting it tasted like burnt dirt. I'd suddenly become obsessed with bird feeders during the pandemic. Neither of us could explain why. Things just happened. But then Wednesday came. Another kiss. "Thank you." Thursday. "Thank you." Friday morning. Exactly the same. By the weekend, I'd heard those 2 words more times in 5 days than I had in our entire marriage. It started becoming impossible to ignore. Saturday afternoon, we were grocery shopping while Noah stayed home playing video games with his friends. Emily reached for a box of cereal on the top shelf before realizing she couldn't quite reach it. I grabbed it for her without saying anything. She smiled. "Thank you." A few minutes later, I pushed the shopping cart over a puddle in the parking lot so she wouldn't have to step through it. "Thank you." That evening, I opened a stubborn jar of pasta sauce. "Thank you." I finally laughed. "Okay, seriously, did somebody tell you to start thanking me for everything?" She looked genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" I smiled. "You've probably thanked me more this week than you have in the last 10 years. She laughed softly. "Is that a bad thing?" "No, just different. I guess I've been thinking lately." "About what?" She paused just long enough for me to notice. "About how many little things we stopped noticing." Then she changed the subject before I could ask anything else. At the time, I thought it was one of those conversations that sounds deeper than it really is. Emily had always been more reflective than I was. Sometimes she'd say something philosophical over dinner, and 2 minutes later she'd be arguing with Noah about whose turn it was to unload the dishwasher. Life moved on. Monday morning came. I kissed her. "Thank you." Tuesday. The same. Wednesday. Again. By the end of the second week, I realized something that made me surprisingly uncomfortable. It wasn't the words themselves, it was that every single thank you sounded exactly the same. It wasn't automatic politeness. It wasn't forced. She said it with the kind of sincerity people usually reserve for something they've almost lost. That thought stayed with me longer than I wanted it to. A couple of days later, I mentioned it to my friend Mark during lunch at work. He laughed before I even finished explaining. "So your wife appreciates you now? That's your big crisis?" "I know how it sounds. It sounds like you're looking for problems." "Maybe." He shook his head. "My wife barely notices when I mow the lawn. If she suddenly started thanking me every time I kissed her, I'd buy flowers and keep my mouth shut." I laughed with him because honestly, he wasn't wrong. By the time I drove home that evening, I'd convinced myself I was overthinking everything. Emily greeted me with a hug at the door. I kissed the top of her head. She looked up at me. "Thank you." Something about hearing it the moment I walked through the door made it land differently. I didn't say anything. Instead, I just studied her face for a second. She looked healthy. She wasn't losing weight. She was sleeping normally. She still laughed with Noah while they cooked dinner together. She still argued with me about leaving coffee mugs around the house. Everything looked exactly the same. Except now I started noticing little things that I couldn't remember seeing before. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me while I read the newspaper in the morning. The second I looked up, she'd smile and pretend she'd been looking somewhere else. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night and find her awake beside me, not scrolling on her phone or reading a book, just quietly looking at me in the dark. The moment she realized I was awake, she'd smile, lean over, kiss my forehead, and whisper, "Go back to sleep." When I asked what she was doing, she'd always give the same answer: "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing. I could feel it. I just couldn't figure out what it was. The first moment I truly became worried happened almost 3 weeks after that first thank you. I got home from work earlier than usual because one of my afternoon meetings had been canceled. Noah was still at baseball practice, so the house should have been empty except for Emily. When I opened the front door, I didn't hear the television. I didn't hear music. The whole house was strangely quiet. Then, as I walked upstairs, I heard voices coming from our bedroom. At first I thought she was on the phone, but as I got closer, I realized those voices sounded familiar. They were ours. They were coming from my laptop. I slowed down without really thinking about it. The bedroom door was half open, and from the hallway I could hear laughter. My laughter. Then Emily's. Then Noah's voice, except he sounded much younger. I pushed the door open. Emily was sitting on our bed with my old laptop balanced across her knees. She hadn't noticed me yet. On the screen was a home video from years ago. Noah couldn't have been older than 5. He was chasing our dog around the backyard while I pretended to referee whatever game he'd invented. Emily was behind the camera laughing so hard she could barely keep the picture steady. I stood there for a few seconds before she finally looked up. She jumped. "Oh, you're home early." "I guess I am." She immediately reached for the keyboard and paused the video. "What are you watching?" "Just old videos." "I can see that." She smiled, but there was something uncomfortable about the way she closed the laptop almost too quickly. "I was organizing files." "You've been organizing them for almost half an hour?" She looked surprised. "How long have you been standing there?" "Long enough." For a second I thought she'd explain. Instead, she stood up, walked over, kissed me on the cheek, and quietly said, "Thank you." There it was again. I watched her walk past me toward the kitchen. Nothing about her body language suggested she'd been caught doing something wrong. If anything, she looked peaceful. That somehow bothered me even more. That night, after she'd fallen asleep, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I kept replaying the scene in my head. It wasn't unusual to watch old family videos. We'd done that before around Christmas or birthdays. But Emily had never done it alone, and she'd definitely never spent hours going through them. The next morning, I asked Noah if he'd noticed anything different about his mom lately. He shrugged. "Like what?" "I don't know. Has she seemed different?" He looked up from pouring cereal. "She's been nicer." "Nicer?" "Yeah." "How?" "I forgot to take the trash out yesterday." So normally she'd remind me like 5 times. And? This time she just smiled and said she'd do it herself. I frowned. That's not like her. "Nope." He took another bite. "She also hugged me before school yesterday." "She hugs you all the time." "Not like that." "What do you mean?" He thought about it. It was longer. Kids notice things adults don't. I drove to work thinking about that conversation more than I wanted to admit. Maybe Mark was right. Maybe I was inventing problems because life had become too predictable. But then little moments kept piling up. That Friday, Emily called me at work around lunchtime. She almost never called unless something was wrong. The second I answered, I asked, "Everything okay?" "Yes." "You scared me." "I just wanted to hear your voice." I laughed. "You've heard it for 20 years. "I know." There was a short silence. "I'm interrupting work, aren't I?" "A little." "I'm sorry." "You don't have to apologize." "I know." Another pause. "I love you." "I love you too." "Okay." She hung up. The whole call lasted maybe 40 seconds. I stared at my phone for a long time afterward. There wasn't anything wrong with what she'd said. In fact, most husbands would probably kill to get a random phone call like that. So why did it make me uneasy? Because it felt deliberate. Nothing was automatic anymore. That weekend we went to Noah's baseball game. Emily spent almost the entire game taking pictures. Not of Noah, of us. She snapped a picture while Noah was warming up. Another while I was buying hot dogs. One while I was laughing at something another dad had said. At one point I finally asked, "Since when did you become the family photographer?" She looked down at the camera. "I don't know. You've taken like 50 pictures today." "I guess I have." "What are they for?" She smiled. "So we don't forget." The answer seemed innocent enough, except Emily had never cared much about pictures. I was the one who usually reminded everyone to smile for family photos. She was the one rolling her eyes because she wanted to leave. Now she couldn't stop taking them. Sunday evening, I walked into our bedroom looking for my charger. Emily didn't hear me come in. She was sitting on the floor beside our closet with several old photo albums spread around her. She wasn't flipping through them quickly. She was studying each page, touching the photographs with her fingertips, almost like she was trying to memorize every face. I leaned against the doorframe. "That's 2 weekends in a row." She looked up. "What?" "The old pictures." "Oh," she smiled. "I forgot we even had these." "You've seen them 100 times." "I know." She carefully closed one album. "I guess I never really looked." I walked over and sat beside her. One picture caught my attention. It was from our honeymoon in Maine. We looked exhausted after hiking all day. Emily laughed when she saw me staring at it. "I remember that. I remember getting lost. You insisted you knew where the trail ended." "I did." "You didn't." "I eventually did." She laughed harder. God, I loved that laugh. Without thinking, I wrapped an arm around her shoulders and kissed her temple. She closed her eyes, then quietly whispered, "Thank you." This time I didn't smile. "Emily." Please tell me what's going on." She opened her eyes. "What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean." "I don't. These last few weeks, you've been different." Her smile faded slightly. "Different how?" "You keep thanking me every time I touch you. You're going through old videos, looking at photo albums, taking pictures of everything. You called me at work just to hear my voice." She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she reached over and took my hand. "I didn't realize I was worrying you." "You are." "I'm sorry." "Then tell me what's happening." For a moment I genuinely thought she would. She looked at me with tears just beginning to form in her eyes. Then she blinked them away. "I'm just appreciating things more." "Why?" "I don't know." "Emily." She squeezed my hand. "I promise you. I'm okay." She leaned forward and kissed my cheek before standing up. "I'm going to start dinner." She walked out of the room, leaving me sitting on the floor surrounded by 20 years of photographs. As I started putting the albums back into their storage box, something slipped from between 2 pages and landed upside down on the carpet. It wasn't a photograph. It was a folded piece of paper, old, yellow around the edges. I picked it up. Across the front, written in Emily's handwriting, were 6 words. "Things I never want to forget." I looked toward the hallway to make sure Emily wasn't coming back before I unfolded it. The paper had clearly been folded and unfolded dozens of times. The edges were soft and the ink had faded just enough to tell me it wasn't something she'd written recently. I expected a grocery list, maybe vacation plans. Instead, there was only a short list written in her handwriting. "Things I never want to forget." Underneath were several bullet points. The sound of Daniel laughing when he burns toast. Noah pretending he isn't scared during thunderstorms. Sunday mornings with coffee on the back porch. The way our house smells after Christmas dinner. I frowned. None of it made sense. There wasn't a date. There wasn't any explanation. Just a list of memories. I heard footsteps coming upstairs and folded the paper before Emily walked back into the room. "You found something?" she asked. I held it up. "This." Her smile disappeared for just a fraction of a second. "Oh, what is it?" She walked over, took the paper from my hand and looked at it for a moment. "I forgot I wrote that." "When?" "I honestly don't remember." She folded it again and slid it back into the photo album. "I should probably throw it away." "Why?" She shrugged. "I don't need it anymore." That answer only confused me more. "What was it for?" "I don't know." She smiled again, almost forcing herself to. "It was a long time ago." Then she picked up the box of albums and carried it into the closet before I could ask another question. I didn't sleep well that night. Not because I thought Emily was lying, because I could tell she wasn't telling me everything. There's a difference. People assume marriage means you'll always know when your spouse is hiding something. That's not true. Sometimes you don't notice at all. Other times you notice immediately, but you also know pushing harder will only make them shut down. That's where I was. I knew something had changed. I just had no idea what. Monday morning, I decided to stop obsessing over it. I kissed her goodbye. She smiled. "Thank you." I smiled back. "You're welcome." If she wasn't ready to tell me, maybe I just needed to give her time. That decision lasted exactly 6 hours. Around 1 in the afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily. Not unusual, except there was no message, just a picture. It was one of our wedding photos. I'd almost forgotten it existed. The 2 of us were standing outside the church. I was 26. She was 24. We both looked terrified and ridiculously happy at the same time. A few seconds later, another message appeared. I still love this day. I smiled without realizing it. I replied, me too. Almost instantly she answered, me three. I laughed. For the first time in weeks, everything felt normal. Then another message arrived. I'm lucky I got to have it. I stared at those words. Not, I'm lucky we had it. Not, I'm lucky we found each other. I'm lucky I got to have it. Something about the wording bothered me. I typed, that's a strange way to put it. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally she replied, I guess it is. Ignore me. That was it. No explanation. That evening I almost asked her about the text. Almost. But Noah had gotten an A on his science project and spent dinner talking non-stop about building a robot for the school competition. Emily smiled through the whole conversation. She laughed at all the right moments. She looked happy, not pretending, actually happy, which somehow made everything even stranger. Later that night, after Noah had gone upstairs, Emily and I sat on the couch watching television, or pretending to. Neither of us was really paying attention. Halfway through the movie, she rested her head on my shoulder. She hadn't done that in months, not because anything was wrong. Life just gets busy. People stop sitting close without realizing it. I wrapped an arm around her. She took a slow breath. You know something, she said. What? I've always felt safe with you. I smiled. I'd hope so. No. She shook her head. I mean really safe. I looked down at her. Where's this coming from? I don't know. She laughed quietly. I've just been thinking. About? Us. I waited. She didn't continue. Instead, she reached for the remote and unmuted the television. The conversation was over before it had really begun. The next afternoon, I got home before either of them. Emily had texted saying she was stopping by the grocery store after picking Noah up from practice. I had about 30 minutes to myself. I walked into the kitchen looking for a snack when I noticed her planner sitting open on the counter. Emily lived by that planner. Doctor appointments, school events, birthdays, bills, everything went into it. I wasn't snooping, at least I didn't think I was. I was just going to close it before someone spilled something on it. As I reached for it, one page caught my eye. The entire month was filled with ordinary reminders: dentist, oil change, parent-teacher conference. But nearly every single day had one small checkmark written in blue ink. Nothing else, just a checkmark. Every day, for almost 3 weeks. I flipped back another page. The same thing, checkmarks. One every day. I frowned. What exactly was she checking off? There wasn't any explanation. No label, no title, just small blue checkmarks filling almost every date. I heard the garage door begin to open. I quickly closed the planner and stepped away from the counter. Emily walked in carrying grocery bags. She smiled the second she saw me. You're home. I am. She walked over, kissed me first this time, and before I could say a word, she whispered, "Thank you." That was the moment I realized I couldn't keep pretending this was just another harmless habit. I didn't say anything while we unpacked the groceries. I helped put everything away, made dinner with her like we always did, listened to Noah complain about algebra, even laughed when he started doing terrible impressions of his history teacher. Outwardly, everything looked normal. Inside my head, though, the pieces kept piling up, and none of them fit together. The old videos, the photo albums, the random phone call, the strange text messages, the list of memories, the check marks on the calendar, and now this constant need to thank me for the smallest displays of affection. That night, after Noah went upstairs, I decided I couldn't keep dancing around it. Can we talk? Emily looked up from folding laundry. Of course. I always am. No, I shook my head. Not lately. She slowly put the towel down. What makes you say that? Because something's happening. She waited. You've changed. I'm still me. I know you are. That's what makes this so confusing. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, she asked quietly, "Are you unhappy?" The question caught me completely off guard. What? With us? No. Are you sure? I stared at her. Emily, where's this coming from? I just wanted to ask. I've never been more sure of anything. She nodded slowly, almost as if she'd been hoping for that answer. Then she smiled. Good. That was it. No explanation, no follow-up. She simply picked up another towel and continued folding laundry as though we hadn't just had one of the strangest conversations of our marriage. A few days later, something happened that I couldn't explain away. I got home before everyone else again. The house was quiet, and since I'd forgotten my headphones that morning, I went into our bedroom looking for an old pair. The closet door was open. Emily's side was unusually messy. She normally kept everything perfectly organized. While moving a stack of sweaters, I noticed a small cardboard box pushed all the way to the back. It wasn't hidden, just tucked away. I pulled it forward. Inside were dozens of little things: movie ticket stubs, a seashell, a dried flower, a hospital bracelet, our honeymoon hotel key card, one of Noah's tiny baby socks, even the cheap plastic bracelet from the county fair where I'd somehow won her a stuffed bear on my third try. I smiled without meaning to. I'd forgotten half these things existed. Then I noticed every single item had a small handwritten note attached to it. First apartment, the beach where Noah learned to swim, the concert where Daniel lost his voice singing, the day we thought we'd never stop laughing. It looked less like a memory box and more like someone trying to preserve an entire life. I heard the front door downstairs. Without thinking, I put everything back exactly where I'd found it. By the time Emily walked into the bedroom, I was sitting on the edge of the bed pretending to scroll through my phone. She smiled. "There you are. There I am." She kissed me. "Thank you." This time I couldn't smile back. "Emily." She immediately knew from my voice that something was wrong. "What happened?" "I found the box." Her expression froze. "What box?" "The one in the closet." Neither of us spoke. She looked toward the closet without turning her head, then back at me. "You opened it." "I wasn't looking for it." "I know." "What is it?" She sat beside me. For a long time she just looked at her hands. Finally she whispered, "It's just memories. People don't collect memories like that for no reason." "I know." "So tell me the reason." She closed her eyes. "I can't." "You can't, or you won't." "I can't." There was no anger in her voice, no defensiveness, just exhaustion. I reached for her hand. "Are you sick?" Her eyes immediately met mine. "What?" "Just answer me." "No." "Cancer?" "No." "Heart?" She shook her head. "No." "Oh, then what?" "I'm healthy." "You swear?" "I swear." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. If she wasn't sick, then what on earth was happening? The next afternoon I couldn't focus at work. I kept replaying every conversation we'd had over the last month. Every thank you, every smile, every strange answer. Finally, during lunch, I called my older sister, Rachel. She'd always been closer to Emily than anyone else in my family. If something was wrong, maybe she'd know. After a few minutes of small talk, I finally asked, "Has Emily said anything to you lately?" Rachel hesitated. "About what?" "I don't know. That's not very specific." "Has she seemed different?" There was another pause. "Why are you asking?" My stomach tightened. "You noticed too." "I didn't say that." "But you did." Rachel sighed. "I promised I wouldn't interfere." The words hit me like a punch. "You promised who?" Silence. "Rachel." "I shouldn't have answered the phone." "What did she tell you?" "I can't. Please." I gave her my word. "What is everyone keeping from me?" "No one's keeping anything from you." "Then explain all this." "I can't." Before hanging up, she said something that stayed with me the entire drive home. "Just be patient with her a little longer." "A little longer." "Longer until what?" That evening I pulled into the driveway just as Emily was getting out of her car. She smiled the second she saw me, walked over, wrapped both arms around me, held me tighter than she had in years, then quietly whispered into my shoulder, "I love you." Not unusual. Except this time. Her voice was trembling. I didn't know what to say, so I hugged her back. We stood in the driveway for what was probably only 15 or 20 seconds, but it felt much longer. When she finally let go, she smiled the same warm smile I'd been seeing for weeks, wiped at the corner of one eye as if something had gotten in it, and picked up the grocery bags. "What?" I asked. "What?" "You almost started crying." She looked genuinely surprised. "I did?" "Emily." She shook her head. "I'm just emotional today." "Why?" "I don't know." There it was again. Another answer that explained nothing. That night I barely slept. Around 3 in the morning I woke up and reached across the bed. Emily wasn't there. For a split second my heart started racing. Then I noticed a light downstairs. I walked quietly toward the living room. She was sitting on the couch with only the lamp beside her turned on. The television wasn't playing. Her phone was lying face down on the coffee table. She was simply sitting there with a blanket around her shoulders, staring at the family pictures on the fireplace mantel. She heard me before I spoke. "I woke you. You weren't in bed." "I couldn't sleep." I sat beside her. Neither of us said anything for almost a minute. Finally I asked, "What's going on inside your head?" She kept looking at the photographs. "Do you ever think about how fast everything happened?" "What do you mean?" "It feels like yesterday we were moving into our first apartment." She smiled at one of the pictures. And somehow now Noah's talking about colleges. I laughed. He's 14. I know, but he'll be talking about colleges before we know it. She nodded. Exactly. There was something about the way she said it that made me feel unexpectedly sad. We've had a good life, she whispered. We still do. I know. I reached for her hand. Then why are you talking like it's over? She turned toward me so quickly that I instantly regretted saying it. It's not. Then stop scaring me. I'm trying. No, you're really not. For the first time in weeks, I saw guilt on her face. Not fear, not sadness. Guilt. She leaned against my shoulder. I'm sorry. What are you apologizing for? For making you worry. Then make me stop worrying. She closed her eyes. I will. When? Soon. Soon. Everything was always soon. Never today. Never tonight. Just soon. The following Saturday morning, Noah left early for baseball practice with one of his teammates, leaving Emily and me alone in the house. She was making pancakes while I stood beside her stealing pieces before she could put them on the plate. She slapped my hand away with the spatula. You've done that for 20 years, and you've complained about it for 20 years, because you never stop. I've got a reputation to protect. She laughed, a real laugh, the kind I hadn't heard in weeks. For a moment, everything felt completely normal again. I wrapped my arms around her from behind. She leaned back against my chest. Love you, I said. I love you too. I kissed the side of her head. She closed her eyes. Thank you. I finally asked the question that had been building inside me for almost a month. What exactly are you thanking me for? She didn't answer. I waited. Finally, she turned off the stove, faced me, and looked directly into my eyes. For staying. I frowned. I was never leaving. I know. Then why would you thank me for staying? She looked down at the floor. You wouldn't understand. Then help me understand. She opened her mouth, closed it again, took a slow breath, then quietly said, Not yet. I almost lost my patience. Almost. Instead, I walked outside onto the back porch to clear my head. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. Normally, I would have ignored it. Something made me answer. Hello? Is this Daniel Carter? Yes. My name is Dr. Harris. I frowned. I'm sorry. I'm not calling as your physician. My stomach tightened. I'm calling because Emily listed you as her emergency contact during a consultation. Every muscle in my body went rigid. What consultation? There was a pause. I'm sorry. I may have misunderstood the notes. What consultation? I'm afraid I shouldn't have called before confirming the file. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear my own voice. Doctor, is my wife okay? I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. I believe I've made a mistake. The line went dead. I stood frozen on the porch staring at my phone. I immediately called the number back. Reception answered. The woman who picked up had no idea what I was talking about. She transferred me twice before finally telling me Dr. Harris wasn't available. I drove there less than an hour later. The receptionist looked genuinely confused after checking their records. I'm sorry, sir. We don't have anyone here named Emily Carter as a current patient. Then why did your doctor call me? I honestly don't know. Can you ask him? He's with another patient. I waited anyway. Almost 45 minutes later, a man in his 60s walked into the lobby. I believe you're Mr. Carter. Yes. He looked embarrassed. I owe you an apology. You called me. I did. You said my wife had a consultation. I confused two patient files. I stared at him. What? There are two women with extremely similar names. So, my wife has never been here? No. I didn't call about her. You scared me half to death. I know. I'm truly sorry. I wanted to believe him. Everything he said sounded reasonable. Simple mistake. Wrong file. It happens. But as I walked back to my car, one thought refused to leave my head. If Emily had never been to that clinic, then why had my very first instinct been to believe she was hiding a diagnosis from me? And why? Deep down, did it still feel like I was missing something much bigger? I didn't tell Emily about the phone call, not because I was trying to hide anything, because I knew exactly how it would sound. A doctor accidentally called the wrong husband. It was absurd, and yet the timing had been too perfect. For the next few days, I tried forcing myself to forget about it. I buried myself in work, spent extra time helping Noah with his science project, even agreed to repaint the fence because Emily had been asking me for almost a year. Life slowly slipped back toward normal, or at least it looked normal. Emily still thanked me every time I kissed her. She still took too many pictures. She still looked at me every now and then with an expression I couldn't explain. But after our conversation on the couch, something else changed. She stopped avoiding me. If anything, she wanted to be close to me all the time. She'd sit beside me instead of across from me, reach for my hand while we watched television, rest her head on my shoulder while we read. Little things, things we used to do years ago before work schedules, bills and teenage baseball practices slowly filled every spare minute. One Friday evening we were cleaning out the garage. It had become one of those places where broken lamps, old paint cans, Christmas decorations, and forgotten boxes all ended up together. Emily was going through one shelf while I sorted through another. "You remember this?" she asked. I turned around. She was holding an old camping lantern. I laughed. "I thought we threw that thing away. It still works." "It barely worked back then." She smiled. Yellowstone. I immediately knew what she meant. 8 years earlier, we'd taken Noah camping in Yellowstone. Our tent leaked during a thunderstorm. The lantern kept flickering all night. We spent half the trip soaking wet and convinced we'd never go camping again. It had become one of our favorite family memories. Emily looked down at the lantern. "I think that was my favorite vacation." "Really? You don't? I would have guessed Hawaii." She shook her head. "Hawaii was beautiful. But Yellowstone felt," she smiled to herself, "real." I laughed. "Real because everything went wrong?" "Exactly." She handed me the lantern. "Keep it." "Seriously?" "Yeah. Even though we'll probably never use it again." I looked at her. There it was again. That strange way of talking. Like ordinary objects had suddenly become priceless. That night, after we'd finished cleaning the garage, Noah left to spend the night at a friend's house. The house felt unusually quiet. Emily ordered pizza. We watched an old comedy we'd seen at least 10 times. Halfway through the movie, she started laughing before the punchlines arrived because she already knew every joke. I started laughing at her instead of the movie. "What? You still ruin comedies." "I do not. You absolutely do. You laugh too early. I know what's coming." "So do I." "Not like I do." For the first time in weeks, we laughed until both of us had tears in our eyes. When the movie ended, she didn't reach for the remote. She just looked at me. "I've missed this. We watched a movie 3 days ago." "I know. I mean, this." She gestured between us. I knew exactly what she meant. Somewhere along the way, we'd become partners managing a household instead of two people who simply enjoyed sitting together. Work, school, bills, appointments. Life has a way of stealing little moments without asking permission. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. She frowned. "For what?" I think I stopped noticing. Her eyes softened. So did I. She reached across the couch and intertwined her fingers with mine. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, she whispered something so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "I'm really glad you're here. I've always been here." "I know," she smiled. "I just needed to hear myself say it." 2 mornings later, everything finally made sense. Or at least, it started to. It was Sunday. Emily had gone for an early walk before breakfast. Noah was still asleep upstairs. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed. It was Rachel. "I need to tell you something." Her voice sounded different, like she'd been rehearsing the conversation. "What happened?" "I can't keep lying to you." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "Rachel, I asked Emily if she'd told you, and she said she was going to." "When?" "Today." My pulse quickened. "Tell me now." She was quiet for several seconds. Finally, she spoke. "Do you remember your surgery 2 years ago?" I frowned. Of course, I'd almost forgotten about it. A routine brain surgery to remove a benign growth pressing against a nerve. The doctors had assured us everything would be fine. The operation had gone well. Recovery had taken months. Eventually, life had returned to normal, or so I thought. Rachel continued. "Do you remember anything after the surgery?" "Bits and pieces. I was pretty out of it." "You were." "So." She took a deep breath. "The doctors asked Emily to stay after one of your consultations." I stopped breathing. "What consultation?" "They wanted to prepare her." "For what?" "In case." Rachel's voice cracked. "In case you never came back." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "They told her the surgery had gone well, but there was no guarantee the man she married would still be there afterward." I couldn't say a word. Rachel kept talking. "They explained that sometimes people survive, but their personalities change. Sometimes memories disappear. Sometimes emotions disappear. Sometimes families spend years living with someone who looks the same, but isn't." The coffee maker beeped. Neither of us moved. Emily sat in that hospital waiting room believing she might already have kissed you goodbye. Every hair on my arm stood up. Rachel continued through tears. "You woke up, but for weeks you were confused. You forgot conversations. You forgot what day it was. You asked the same questions over and over. I remember some of that. You don't remember her. What do you mean? She never left your side. She slept in hospital chairs. She cried in bathrooms because she didn't want you to see. The doctors kept telling her, just wait, give it time. Maybe he'll come back. And one morning, Rachel paused. You looked at her. You smiled. You called her M, the nickname you'd called her since college. Rachel started crying. She told me later that was the moment she finally believed she'd gotten her husband back. I closed my eyes. Every strange moment over the last month suddenly rearranged itself inside my head. The photographs, the videos, the keepsakes, the thank yous, the hugs, the long looks, the list. None of it had been about preparing to lose me. It had been about remembering what it felt like when she almost already had. At that exact moment, I heard the front door open. Emily was home. She stepped into the kitchen carrying 2 coffees from the little cafe near the park. She smiled the moment she saw me. Then she looked at my face. Immediately her smile faded. Rachel told you. It wasn't a question. I couldn't even answer. She slowly set the coffee cups on the counter, walked toward me, and with tears already running down her cheeks, she whispered the words I'd been trying to understand for over a month. Every time you kiss me. I remember the day I thought I'd never feel it again. I felt my own eyes fill. She took both of my hands. I started saying thank you because I realized I spent years assuming we'd always have another morning. She laughed softly through her tears. Then one day a doctor told me we might not. I pulled her into my arms. She buried her face against my chest exactly the way she had in the driveway days earlier. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Finally, I whispered into her hair, "I'm sorry you carried that alone." She shook her head. "No, thank you for waiting for me."